First, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. During this discussion, feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will ask them kind of as we see them, if it's a great spot. And everything that we don't get to during the discussion, we will keep and go through at the end if we have time. Be sure to check out ECAC's website, ecacusa.org. Follow us on LinkedIn and stay engaged. So I will introduce Stuart. Take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, everybody. I'm Stuart Discount. I'm the chairman of the Enterprise Communications Advocacy Coalition. I want to welcome all attendees, including our ECAC member partners. Just a little quick background on who we are. The Enterprise Communications Advocacy Coalition was founded by several of us who were former leaders of the ATA PACE Government Affairs team, with the goal of advocating and educating Congress and regulatory bodies on issues impacting contact centers and enterprise communications. With PACE's closure, the industry needs a nonprofit coalition to promote ethical legal communications and support. So that's why we started this. For those who are not yet members, we encourage you to join us in shaping industry policy and influence regulations that directly affect your operations. Membership includes a range of benefits, including access to webinars, alerts, and thought leadership opportunities, all for $4,000 annually. Please visit our LinkedIn page for more insights and feel free to connect with us at any time at ecacusa.org. Today's webinar, Unraveling Fraud and Lead Generation, Do You Really Have Consent? Obviously is a timely topic considering what's going to happen at the end of January with the new consent laws. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to thank Holly Paulus, CEO of the Nexa Group, who really put this together. And Holly's a member partner and serves on our executive committee. So let me introduce our panelists for today, and I want to thank them in advance for agreeing to be part of this webinar today and as part of our series of webinars. So Ross Bryman is the Chief Executive Officer of Lead Prosper, a leading SaaS platform specializing in lead distribution technology. Rich Kahn is a professional with decades of experience in digital marketing. He currently serves as co-founder and CEO of Anora. And last but not least, Jeff Rogers. Jeff is the Executive Vice President of Marketing, Operations, and Customer Care at Indra Energy, where he has been a key leader since 2020. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for your participation. And let's start out by really setting the foundation for the conversation. Rich, how big a problem is lead fraud today?
All right, so I've scanned hundreds of clients' data, and so my data is based on that small sample of the market as a whole. And what I'm finding is that 1 in 4 leads that are being generated today are being generated fraudulently. And what I mean by fraudulently is whether it's bot, AI, malware, human fraud, walking in and filling out a form with the sole purpose of trying to make money somewhere along the line, right? Somebody is, some lead generators paying money for marketing, whether it's coming from search or social, programmatic, affiliate marketing, email marketing, whatever channel they're using. And every channel has some level of fraud. But just to put that in perspective, ad fraud is at the heart of that, which is generating those leads that are ultimately being sold in the marketplace. So last year, as a global society, we tipped over $600 billion in spend in digital marketing. Of that, based on our estimates, 125 billion was lost to fraud. That represents about 21% of the actual spend, and that's just a mix of the markets. So when you look at lead gen, when people are picking up leads and buying leads, they get these leads, 1 in 4, unless they're doing something to protect themselves, on average, 1 in 4 of these leads are the wrong person. It's not the person, it's fraudulent.
Big problem. I guess giving away to why there's so much scrutiny and why these rules came up with. Very interesting. So Jeff or Ross, your thoughts on that same? Are you seeing the same same results? And
yeah, I definitely seeing what Richard's seeing, and you need tools, you need validation software, you need to be using Anura, you need Trusted Form or Drenaya. You have to be looking at your data or doing the best you can to prevent this fraud from happening, or auditing your data, looking at your data. It's Richard said, 1 out of 4 leads, like that is a big number. And if you're not being proactive and you're being reactive, it's going to be too late. You're going to get hit with a lawsuit or something's going to happen. And a lot of these businesses can't afford a lawsuit, like the ones we're seeing. You got to be proactive, and you have to know what's going on. You have to be grilling your data sources, your publishers. You have to be, if you own your own call center, you need a feedback loop. You need to know what's converting. You have to be tracking sub IDs. There's a lot that goes into it. I think the biggest thing is being proactive and using the tools that are out there to do your best to ensure you're not buying a fraudulent lead, because there's a big, you don't want to deal with that problem if you can avoid it.
And speaking from my perspective, being a supplier in energy and having call centers, I mean, I do exactly that. I need to make sure I'm partnering with a reputable companies such as Lead Prospect. We do with Active Prospect. I have relationship with Five9 that we own our own telephony system and domain, so I can control who we call, when we call, make sure we're 100% compliant from that perspective. And data is the king of being able to make sure that we're tracking, our the leads that we purchase, what the costs are, what the contact rate, what the conversion rates are, and all the data behind that, just to make sure that there's not an anomaly there that's an outlier that I can go in and investigate. But it takes a lot of work, a lot of manual work at this point to be able to really drill down in that data and identify where you might have some problem areas. Because believe me, I mean, I get my worst fears on a Monday morning and Friday, because it seems like it's Mondays and Fridays. You get the email from the attorney generals.
And all that data leaves clues, whether they're positive or negative. There's some kind of clue in that data, and you have to monitor it.
Yeah.
And that's the best advice I can give.
So what happens with the consent if fraud is involved? I mean, what are we seeing?
So here's an example, right? Fraudulent visitor is trying to take advantage of an affiliate program or paid marketing or something, and they know that they have to fill out so many forms in order for their marketing channel to stay active, because any marketing manager worth their salt is going to knock down a source that doesn't produce any results, right? There's no ROI, there's no conversion, let's knock it out. So they know they got to fill out a form. So let's say they grabbed Holly's information, which is easy to get, went to the form, spoofed her IP address, spoofed her device, made it look like it's coming from her location, filled out the form. And what most of these guys are using now are human fraud forms. So when you're watching recordings, they look real, or even some of the AI bots now look really real when you're looking at these playbacks of them filling out the form, typing it in, making a mistake, correcting themselves. It looks legit. Hit submit. Okay, they got paid on that conversion. Now, let's say somebody on Ross's network decides, I'm going to make that phone call, connects to that lead, makes the phone call, calls Holly and says, hey, just calling you based on the information you filled out on the form. And she's like, I didn't fill out a form, so guess what? You don't have consent from Holly. So when consent is concerned, if that lead was submitted fraudulently, which like I said is 1 in 4 leads, and you make that call, damage has been done. It's already too late. And let's face it, when you look at the way it works, Holly's getting a call she doesn't know where it's coming from. 9 times out of 10, she's not going to answer the call, right? So you're going to call a couple times, 5, 10, 15 times to try to get her on the phone. Finally, she answers the phone like, what the heck is this? Find out you just made 10 or 15 phone calls to somebody you don't have consent with. Big problem. Now multiply that over 100,000 calls a month, 200,000, 1 million calls a month, and you see why these class action lawsuits are happening.
That's obviously a problem there.
It is a problem. It's use the integrations that we can. To try to prevent, make sure I know who I'm calling. One of the most recent ones that we have is with Nexa and the reassigned number database, just to make sure that if I'm calling Holly, I'm calling Holly. But still, to Rich's point, if there's a bot or someone that filled that out and completed that form, I can still, determine that it's, the right number, but I could still be out of consent. So it's very, very difficult to make sure that you have that right consent. But I use as many integrations as possible. I don't get caught up in the cost, because when you first start looking at integrations, you start going, oh my God, and this is a lot of, this integration costs this much, this will cost this much, and you start doing the math. But you do the math on the other side, where if you're getting bad leads, you're getting low contact rates, low conversion rates, and potential fines and things like that. I think it's worth the investment to use the integration, the technologies that exist to try to make sure you're dotting the I's, crossing the T's as much as you possibly can at this point.
The beautiful thing is, like you said, you're looking at, all these costs that get added up. But if the tool is doing its job, it's saving you money on the back end or saving you money up front.
Yeah.
Like if you can identify fraudulent, sources of traffic or fraudulent traffic ahead of time, and you could mitigate that, either if it's an affiliate not paid, if it's one of the other sources mitigating how that works, then it actually will pay for itself pretty quickly, especially when you're talking, most companies we're talking to have volume. So it's important to understand, these tools may have an actual cost to them, but you really got to do the math on it. Is an ROI there? Is it going to ROI out for you? Is it going to protect you? Because, sometimes one lawsuit's the difference between your company being open and not. Give you an example. I'm an expert witness on a $1 billion lawsuit with a well-known company. And they knew they had the problem, and they basically in email said, nope, we're not going to do anything about it. They were going to continue selling those leads. And everything I've seen and everything I saw, I'm like, this company's I don't know if it's going to shut the company down, but I don't care who you are, $1 billion bite in the ass is going to hurt.
Absolutely. Wow. So Ross, what are some essential checkpoints in the telemarketing data flow that help ensure leads are compliant with consent regulations?
So again, it's making sure you have the right technologies in place. Anura is an awesome one on the front end. You're going to want your active prospect trusted form or Denia playback within Lead Prosper or other lead distribution platforms. You're going to want to do dupe checks. On IP address. You're going to want to be checking user agents. And you just really want to know the full flow. You need to get that transparency. If you're buying these leads from a third party, you need to know what the flow is. Don't just take a screenshot. You want to see that flow in real time. And you also want to work with your call center, or if your call center, they're a buyer, you want to get that feedback loop. You want to track sub IDs. You can be working with a publisher who has thousands of sub IDs, but one of those, or maybe a handful of sub IDs, are problematic. And if you can track those down quickly, you can cut those off. But again, it all comes back to monitoring your data, being on top of it, and not letting that cycle or flow of your data go too long without you taking action. You need to know as quickly as you can what sub IDs are working, what's converting, get that feedback loop going, and even more so, the manual audit of your playbacks from trusted form or Denia. Watch them, get some eyes on them, watch the flows and see what the journey of that lead is going through, to ensure that what you're buying is compliant and that they're doing what they say they do.
That's more in the lead transparency of, I guess, looking at that whole process.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Rich, how can you tell if the lead is legitimate?
Well, the telltale signs that I tell everyone, and when you're really looking just for, all this data that you're looking at, right? When you're summarizing your data and you're looking at all the conversion values across hundreds of thousands of leads, you start to see signs, because again, they're not truly converting. They're not really, they're not able to connect with them. There's a lot of signs when you look at it in mass. But if you get a single lead, the telltale sign is when you call them and ask and actually get them on the phone. That's the first part. And they basically swear up and down they didn't fill out a form. It's a sign, not definitive result, but it's a sign that it could potentially be a fraudulent lead. It's leads that are hard to reach, where basically they fill out a form, they're interested, you hit submit, next thing you know, it goes through a process, does data checking, does all this number checking, make sure everything looks good, hits a call center within seconds. Next thing you know, the phone's ringing and the person doesn't answer the phone. That doesn't make sense, right? So if you get a lead that is basically ghosting you, again, not a telltale sign, but it's a indication in the right direction that this person filled out a form, seconds later you're calling them, not answering the phone. So there's signs, like to telltale, you need data, right? The way we work is we're collecting over 800 data points on every visitor that lands on a landing page, and from that data we can tell specifically if they're trying to hide themselves. Give you an example. Somebody lands on a landing page. The IP address you look up comes from a Starbucks. Okay, that's legit. People go to Starbucks, use their Wi-Fi, have a coffee, right? Comes from an iPhone 16. Okay, you're using one of the later phones. Everything looks good. Most people would say, hey, this is a good lead. Let's pass it through. It's in the same town as the lead being generated and all this good stuff. But then our software comes along and scans it and finds out that the iPhone didn't have a touchscreen. That's a problem, right? Every iPhone ever generated has a touchscreen. So what's going on? And that's our first sign that this potentially could be a spoofing attack. And then we look at a lot of other data because we don't have any single points of data that say, okay, this one point hit, so it must be fraud. We look at a lot of data points to back it up, because when we say it's fraud, I want our clients to take it to the bank and say, I know for a fact this is a bad lead. And then 9 times out of 10, if they've taken that lead and processed that lead, all that back end data is going to support our findings. So they'll be able to see that they can start trusting our technology in real time on an individual lead basis. This way, they don't get to that point where, okay, we've made 10,000 calls to these sources and we realize, okay, they're all bad. They're all fraudulent. Meanwhile, you've already made those calls. You already broke TCPA. You're already potentially at risk. So you want to try to avoid that risk ahead of time. You want to try to minimize that before it gets to the call center. Nice thing at call center is one fraudulent leads also, because it looks like their connect rates are low. It looks like their conversion rates are low. If they're getting hit, it makes them look bad, even though it's not their fault. It's the leads that are getting fed into the caller, the dialer.
And I think to touch onto that with the IP address, I've seen countless customers who don't even use, there's a validation service called IP registry. It costs a fraction of a penny. And if you're buying leads and your call center is based in the US, you should never be buying, or typically you're not going to want to buy a consumer who's outside of the US. And you can set up this integration. It's a fraction of a penny. And you might as well check to make sure the consumer that you're buying is in at least the US or the geographical areas that you're servicing. Like Rich mentioned, these are simple things you can put into play that can stop that lawsuit or stop that fraudulent lead from getting through. And a lot of people just, I don't know if they don't want to spend the extra fraction of a penny or they're oblivious to it, but there's a lot out there to help. And we try to educate, but some people just don't want to. I'm not sure what the answer is, but to me, it makes sense. Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it's just knowing what's out there, because we look at what's available. I have a team that does that, and we look at these integrations and determine if it's going to be something we want to use. So in some of it, we just have to work with the account managers that like with your company or some of the other companies, just to understand what they are, what they can do, and what the cost is, and how we can prevent that. So some of it is just understanding it, because there is a lot that you can do, but I think that's one of the biggest things. But once you get that, again, you can't be afraid of the cost. And the one you're just talking about, you're right. I mean, it's a fraction of a cost, so that one's easy. But there's other ones that cost a little bit more, and you just got to kind of get past that and see what that's going to do for you on the back end to try to just mitigate any type of complaints and noise with the regulators or attorney generals and things, because it happens. And I think it helps if you can explain everything as best as you possibly can when you do get these complaints. And I like to be proactive with some of them too, and we will actually have discussions with them in advance, as far as some of our processes we have in place to show them what we're doing to try to prevent things. And that helps out too, because they see that we're trying to do everything we can to prevent as much as we can, with the limitations that exist.
I can back that up too. Like our services, basically most of our clients pay a fraction of a penny. So it's not, these services aren't that expensive, but when they look at the monthly cost, it's like, oh my God, it's going to take $1,000 or $2,000 out of my budget. Meanwhile, when you spread it across every lead, it really doesn't, it's not going to hurt your margin. I mean, I can't imagine a half a penny hurting anybody's margin in the lead space. There's enough money to be made there to do things right. It's just, some people are just laser focused on every single penny, even the fraction of the penny, on every lead that they're trying to generate.
If I can spend that fraction of a penny to get an actual contact, an actual conversion, it's more than paid for itself.
Oh yeah, I know that. And it's just, you run against some of the companies out there where they're, every half penny counts, and I get it, but when all the stuff, when these tools do all the work for you, and they're saving time and money. I mean, we even have customers that come to us and tell us how much time per month that they're saving them. And when you look at that, it's like, wow, it's, we're not charging enough, we should be charging more. But no, it's at the end of the day, it's they're cheap enough. The tools are cheap enough out there to be utilized, and they really should be, to protect yourselves, grow your business. And like I said, if the tools are doing right, that investment in that fraction of a penny per visitor is going to more than pay for itself in the back end.
Well, plus it's just relieving so much risk, which, just even getting a letter from an attorney general is going to cost you. The attorney's going to have to get involved. Their hourlies are not fractions of pennies. So it doesn't take much to make up that difference.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people don't look at that. They're more like they're worried about today, the cost per today, as opposed to, okay, prevention, doing the right thing, delivering a better quality product to their end buyer. There's just, everybody has different mindsets in the business. But like I said, if you want to do things right and profitable, these tools will help you do it right and make more money in the process. So they're actually an investment in making more money.
So Jeff, as a user of these leads, what are some of the battle tested ways you are achieving this lead transparency and making your decisions?
I think it's we've talked about, but one thing we do at Indra is we actually have what I kind of refer to as an Indra branded opt-in ad. So it's just you go through these co-registration sites and you complete the registration form, click submit, you start going down the registration or the co-registration journey. We actually have an Indra branded opt-in ad that pops up that it has our company name on it. Has kind of what incentive that we might be offering if you enroll with us as a customer, and it has some TCPA disclaimer language that gives you a little bit of a sense of who we are and what we do, along with some of the other legal things that we need to put in there to try to protect ourselves in case we get any allegations. So that's one of the top things we do is that people can clearly see that. They can clearly see if they click on yes to submit that they're opting in for us to call them, and it's just helpful. And then the integrations that I talked about, I'm not shy about them, and I like the integrations just because I sleep better at night knowing that I'm checking to make sure that I have an active phone number. I'm checking the reassigned number database. Now I got the trusted form certificates, and the one we just talked about, IB registry. Ross, I'm looking at that one too. I just learned about that one not too long ago, so we're probably going to add that one on there as well. So those are things that we do that I think have helped us make sure that we have as best leads as we possibly can. We look at the data behind there as far as the publishers coming that passes those validation checkpoints to make sure I have good contact rates, good conversion rates. If there's anything jumping out that looks funny, we jump on that. So those are great things that we do to try to make sure that we have good, I think, battle tested things that have helped us really feel confident that we are purchasing a good lead. Now, there's still issues with that that we're talking about, but at least again, the integrations help out and the technology to make sure that we're doing everything possible to stay ahead of it.
So some of that is some leads that are coming through your website, directly when they're looking. What about third party?
No, these are coming from co-reg, not our website. So
okay. Okay.
We supply our publishers with the Indra branded opt-in ad, and that's part of the requirement that they have to embed that in their journey. And so consumers can see it and be able to click on it and use that to opt in. So they're not only opting in on the registration page when they first go to whatever site it is, they're then opting in again. It's almost like a double opt-in because they're seeing our Indra branded opt-in ad, and it's required that they have to click a yes or submit or whatever it is to opt in again for us to purchase that lead.
Got it. Some of these questions, I guess, we're in a way repeating ourselves. Some of these are just basic things you have to do that people aren't doing it. So Ross, what steps, if we haven't talked about, can businesses take to prevent fraud in their lead generation process, especially regarding third-party lead sources?
So definitely vetting out your sources and your publishers. A lot of the times they'll send you a screenshot or a URL. You're going to want to watch your trusted forum playbacks or Journaya's. Sometimes they'll pass through a URL, but it's different on the trusted forum. And you're going to want to be able to access that URL and go through the path. I've seen it to where you might copy paste that URL from a trusted forum and that path won't load for you because of the way the publishers or the site owners built it. You can't even access that path. So you need to communicate with your publishers and your third-party suppliers. You need to be able to access that path and act as a consumer and see what the consumer is seeing 100%. I definitely recommend to everyone a manual auditing process of your playbacks. Watch, if you're buying, 100,000 leads a month, watch a few dozen, if not more, of those playbacks. Spot check them. Like Richard said, if you're calling on a consumer and they're not picking up, and you can identify a publisher or a sub ID, there's your first clue. Watch those playbacks. Work backwards. Or if you're getting feedback from your call center that these people have no idea what they're calling you for, again, there's a major clue. Work backwards and watch the playback, identify the source, and you got to do a little bit of work. You can't just, get your leads and assume everything's going to be all right. It's not going to turn out pretty for you. Another thing now is AI is easier and easier to use. You can take data files, upload them to ChatGPT, give them a prompt. Tell me if you see anything suspicious in these IP ranges, or if you see any weird anomalies in my data that might alert or might, signal fraud. You'd be surprised what ChatGPT might tell you on a simple data upload, and the feedback you get and the time and money you save just by, using a simple tool like that. AI's come a long way, and I think the answer we're gonna keep coming back to is the data gives you the clues, and the clues will lead to, the answer that you want to find.
Jeff or Rich, any adding to that?
I'll get into a little bit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
one of the things we help our clients do, just like Ross is talking about, is zero in, because you, like say, we're talking 100,000 leads, 1,000,000 leads, whatever the individual's dealing with. There's a lot of work. So you want to specify exactly where you spend your time, because it's limited, right? We all have 1,000 things that we're doing. So one of the things we help our clients do is zero in on the sub affiliates that are really having some major issues. So if you can drill down and find, like I said, 3 or 4 sub affiliates that are problematic, you want to run through a couple of playbacks just to get some confirmation, but then be able to shut them down and say, hey, I'll take traffic from the others, but not from these, because these are problematic for my network. And same thing with, vetting out the publishers from the get-go. You want to be able to get them on a phone call. You want to have a conversation. You want to understand their business model, where things are coming from. And then when you onboard them, you want to double check to make sure everything you spoke about is what they're doing. I'm buying Facebook traffic. Great. Is it coming from Facebook? Can you see that? Transparency is going to be your key. But I agree. It's vetting out. We even have some clients that are using our technology on their publisher sign-up form, because they're fraudulent to begin with. So they're trying to hide themselves, and they're trying to, they're coming from overseas and they want to pretend they're coming from Florida. So they bounce off a Florida IP address to make it look like that. And we're catching them, spoofing their IP address. So we had different things, like anything you can do to vet them out from the get-go is important, but sometimes it's not the publisher, it's where they buy their traffic. Because if they buy their traffic from programmatic, and let's say they went to the trade desk and they're buying traffic and driving it to a campaign of yours, well, the trade desk has an average of 50% fraud. So they're going to, even though they're a good publisher, they're just not aware that they're seeing that level of fraud. So all these little steps are going to add up to running a good business, right? There's no silver bullet, but you want to do all the right steps. You want to use the right technology. Like I said, you want to build a tech stack that's going to, you want to have fraud detection. You want to have, the journey of active prospects, so you can actually have those proofs of concept for the other types of fraud that exist. Then you want to have, data verification to make sure I'm calling the right person. If it is truly Holly that fill out the form and we know that they're a good visitor, is this the right phone number? Is this the right email? Because you don't want to call the wrong one. You want to have that tech stack in place so that you have your best foot forward. This way, if something happens, you're doing everything you can, but the people that sit back and like, don't invest like that, and don't do that stuff, they're the ones who find themselves in hot water.
Someone actually put a question in. What questions should we ask a list provider to ensure they are doing fraud ID and consent checks on their end before I purchase potentially fraudulent data?
You want to ask them what they're using for fraud protection. Find out, if they, and I've had this before for my personal buying for my company, like, okay, we're a fraud vendor and I'm buying traffic for my network to drive in more leads. First question I ask them is, what are they using for fraud detection? And when they say, what do you mean fraud? Run. They should have an answer. They should, at this day and age, they should be using $125 billion last year. Everybody has fraud. It's just a matter of what level of fraud you have. So you want to check that. Are they using some type of consent system like an active prospect or Jornaya? What other validations are they doing to ensure your safety? Because again, you don't have the ability to touch the visitor and collect certain information anymore. You're trusting them to do it. And it's easier for a company like that to send fraudulent leads down because you have no way of checking it. You can't run Journai, you can't run well, you can run Nora on a light mode, but you can't run the full Nora suite because you're not touching the visitor. The visitor's not being exposed to JavaScript, just like you can't run your own active prospect. You can get the tokens and look at the playbacks later, but I've seen those defrauded as well. So you got to be careful on that. Do your due diligence, just like a publisher. Same thing when you're buying from a source. Drill in and find out exactly what they're doing and make sure you feel comfortable with their process. There's only so much you can do to validate their process, but they should have a good story to tell you, and then watch the data. Just like Jeff said before, watch the conversion value, follow the money. What's going on with the leads? Are they converting at the right level? Is there anything that you're seeing as you start to buy that source that's questionable?
And I hate to say this, but if they're a new provider, it's hard to, not that I don't trust them, but you shouldn't trust them until you verify it yourself. Like, do everything you can, all your fraud checks, all your validations. Don't take their word for it. It's not worth it, because the lawsuit's gonna end up on your end. If you're that call center, you're gonna be the one in trouble, not the provider. So do what you can to ensure that you're comfortable buying those leads, from that source until you feel comfortable. Maybe you can scale back some of your validations, but I would do what you can to protect yourself, especially early on. And if they're a new source to you that you're not familiar with, you got to do what you can do.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like there's a lot of technology out there, or a lot of services out there that are actually out there. Are there new technologies coming? I mean, is AI, figuring in on this? Look, the bad guys use AI too to do it. It's like, a circle here. But are there some new technologies that you think that's going to make this easier?
Yeah, I'm hoping AI. I hope AI is awesome. Like I said, you can simply take an Excel file of all your data and you can drop it into ChatGPT, and you'll be surprised how quickly it can analyze that data and tell you about your data and give you clues. I think today you have to leverage AI. Like you said, the bad guys are using it. The good guys have to use it too. This might go into one-to-one consent, but I know like Trusted Form is putting out a new product. One-to-one consent is going to be huge. As a lead buyer, you have to make sure you're getting that consent going forward. And yeah, I think all these new, consent verification tools are going to be coming out very shortly, and you're going to want to invest in those and make sure you're getting the proper consent. On top of everything else you're running in terms of validation or fraud detection, you need that consent or you're barking up the wrong tree, very quickly.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, I guess the advice is to, you guys are talking about the ROI on this industry. People are, really looking heavily at that. But I mean, I guess an investment into this is just so important into technologies and services. It's like, dollar pound penny foolish. I mean,
well, think of it this way, right? To put some numbers, put some math. I'm a math guy, right? I love math. Some math behind it, right? So 100, somebody buying 100,000 leads. Let's call it $10 a lead, just for simple math. Call it $1 million a month. We know that 1 in 4 leads are fraudulent. That's $250,000 a month lost to fraud. Is it worth a few bucks to invest and protect that money? It's a no-brainer, right?
It costs you $20,000 a month to have that protection.
Yeah. I mean,
that's why I said I don't charge enough.
Oh my God, you're not doing it. But then, just what Rich says, like you're losing 250, 250,000. I mean, do the math.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a no-brainer. It sounds like, maybe people aren't getting that message for some reason.
I mean, I would say I was in that camp before. It's like you saw the math and you get the pressures, from the CEOs of the company and hires up at the time saying your acquisition cost needs to be X, but I need to spend Y. And then but now that I'm in the position that I'm in, I'm able to kind of influence that. It's starting to work out for us. And like I said, I sleep better at night knowing that I'm spending a little bit more upfront to have the protections in place versus, having, a lot of wasted money on leads and, potential fines and, settlements and things with attorney generals and regulators and stuff like that. So it's worth the investment.
And I also think Richard or Jeff might have touched on this too. If you can stop these fraudulent leads ahead of time, you're actually freeing up time for your call center or, all that back end work. You're only touching the leads that are really want to talk to you. So there's costs that you can't even,
Yeah,
you can't see the savings, but they're there. And those, if you have the metrics and you can really analyze that, your CPAs might be much lower than you think they are. And a lot of people don't think that way. If I'm spending less time on the phone calling people that don't want to talk to me, I should be saving money that way, only talking to the people that really filled out that form. So there's all these ways to look at it and to count those dollars. But if you're stopping the fraud, you're saving more than you can see, I guess, is the short answer there.
Yeah, we talk about there's like, I think it's 4 or 5 different, negative impacts to fraudulent leads on a lead vendor. So first, obviously, is the obvious one is the marketing spend. You're spending, let's in that example, $250,000 a month on leads that are just never going to convert. So it's a waste of marketing spend. You have a brand reputation issue. If you're calling enough leads and people aren't concerned about, what you're selling, about how you got their information because they didn't fill out that form, right? You're also spending more money on call center resources because people that aren't expecting your call aren't answering the phone. So there's a cost there. Trying to think, there was another one that a customer brought up to me, said that, imagine being a call center rep and a phone call, you're making these phone calls to people who supposedly fill out a form. You're expecting to get them on the phone, sell them the product or talk about the product, and you're getting yelled at because they want to know where you got their information. So it kind of demoralizes the salesperson.
Mhm.
And of course, if the salesperson's demoralized, then their closing ratios go down. So it affects you that way too. So there's a bunch of, outside of just the obvious cost of fraud, there's a lot of ancillary costs behind it that cost you as a business.
Yep, exactly. You got to look at that because I could spend, get 100,000 leads and just keep the math simple. And it requires me X number of call center agents to call those leads. And with my conversions down and my costs are up at the call center versus if I can get 50,000 leads that convert higher, I'm saving money on lead costs. I'm saving money on agent costs. I'm saving money across the board. So it just makes sense to be able to do as much diligence as you can to get a good lead that's going to drive contact rates and conversion so you can control costs across the board.
It goes back, I've been in this industry for way too long, and I had my own outbound centers, but this is before predictive dialing, believe it or not. And so every call was quality because you didn't have a dialer. You had to actually dial the phone, and every call you got, the salesperson had to make a great presentation because they didn't know when they were going to get someone else on the phone the next call. Predictive dialers stopped the quality, and that's what brought the TSR into play. That's what brought the TCPA into play because you didn't care about the consumer anymore, but you also didn't look at your own costs. Your conversion rates were in the tank. Even though you were talking to more people, the agents themselves were getting turned down more often using that, and that's what's happening, I'm sure, in the centers. The salespeople are just, it's a little demoralizing having to fight with a consumer. Just why are you calling me?
Yeah.
But then also too, I think the agents, if they keep hearing this negative feedback from the consumers, they're questioning the company they're working for. Where's this data coming from? What are they, who are they having me talk to? And that's not a fun problem to deal with if you have a call center and your agents are questioning what the company is doing. Where is this data coming from? Why am I talking to all these angry people? It's not a fun day of work.
No, it's sales on the telephones are one of the tough jobs out there, and not to give your people the right resources is not going to help you.
Yeah, and it's challenging just, because I oversee our call centers too. I mean, trying to just keep reps on our program because, these are call centers we contract with. There's other programs there. You want them to be on your program and you want the top agents to be on your program. But if the top agents aren't able to perform, they get demoralized, then they went off your program. So you're in a constant, rotation of reps turning through your program that impacts your conversion rates and all that stuff. So it's, if you can provide that quality leads and they like your program, then your program can actually flourish in a call center. And I've been successful in doing that in a lot of call centers just by, working with the teams, making sure I got good quality leads in there and just communicating with them as well, just to make sure we're meeting their needs as well, because it's an important part of the equation.
Absolutely. there's more a global question is, how do you build a robust order process to ensure the consent? Where does it start? I mean, how big a team do you need to be able to do this? Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, that's a loaded question. It definitely depends on how many leads you're buying, per month. But I think audit, like, I don't know maybe Rich will have a good answer, but if you're buying, again, 100,000 leads, how many, I don't know what the right answer is. How many do you think you should manually review and look at? If you're watching 20% of them, that's a lot of manpower of just someone watching a video playback. Obviously automate what you can, data analysis, you want to see what sub IDs are converting. You have to have these reports. You have to know what you're buying, what's converting, what's not. That should be almost instant, feedback loop, all API driven. You need to have that in place or you're wasting a lot of time. But the manual auditing, I think, is needed and underappreciated or not done enough. But I don't know the right answer to that one because it takes, if a lead flow is a couple minutes multiplied by 100,000 and you're watching 5, 10, 15%. It's a lot of time, and hopefully I've been waiting for like AI to come out with where you can upload a video and it can tell you what it's watching, but I don't think we're there yet. That will be an awesome tool if AI can automatically watch these videos and kind of give you a feel for it, but we're not there quite yet. But it needs to be top of mind for sure. Building the teams around this and having a process in place has to be something you're hyper aware of.
I'll give you an example. I was talking to a client and we were just starting the engagement process and starting to work. And what had happened is one of his staff members took a 2-week vacation and they were having a problem with a series of the phone calls that were coming in through the network based on the traffic that they were buying. So he spent the 2 weeks literally listening, manually reviewing as many of the calls as possible, came up with it was interesting that he found, some car somebody was saying that they were looking for car parts for a car, like a Toyota, and I can't remember the name of the car. And he never heard of the Toyota, the model, like, Prius or Camry or Toyota, whatever. He didn't recognize the model. He had to look it up, found out that it was the Prius, or not the Prius, the Toyota Camry made in India. They have a different name for it. And so he started putting things together and he spent 2 weeks going through all this data and then tried to pinpoint the data, try to figure out what's going on. He's like, I just don't have the manpower to do this. So what he did as a blind test was he gave me the data, said, could you process this? So we processed this and we zeroed in exactly on what he found in seconds. And it was just, if I would have done, he said, and this is what he said, he goes, if you would have basically, if I would have run my data through you pinpointed something, I would have scanned a handful of videos and been comfortable with the findings and been able to take action. Instead, he said, I spent 2 weeks trying to put this all together with spreadsheets and video. He said, I don't want to listen to another recording. So
yeah. Well, speaking of call recordings, there's a lot of AI tools out there built for call centers that you could feed in the recordings and it will give you a feedback right away on these calls or flag the ones that are suspicious or saying you can put bad keywords and it will alert you. And again, like Richard's saying, saving you that time so you can hone in on the ones that have those flags and go right to them. So I guess there is AI on the call center recording side for sure you should be looking into.
But going back to the original question, I think you can minimize the staff needed if you have the right tools in place. Like I said, there's still obviously you can't replace human intervention. You got to have that mind and everything else. And AI may eventually get there. We'll see. When it takes over everything, right? But in the interim, like if you have the right tools in place, it should minimize the amount of man hours that is needed to validate and audit your systems. But then you always want to have that touch, but you want to know where to spend your time. If you're only going to listen to an hour, 2 hours worth of video, which one should you be looking at? And you want some tools to help pinpoint, hey, this is where you want to spend your time, so your time is used more efficiently.
Right. Yeah. All makes sense. That's, you guys have any closing? There's no more questions in the box. Guys, I really want to thank you. I don't know if you guys have some closing comments. I guess January 2025 is going to be very interesting to see who was prepared and who wasn't.
I think that's a whole other webinar right there.
Oh yeah.
Consent.
Yeah. So, well, if there's nothing else, so guys, I really want to thank you. We'll give people about 15 minutes of their day back. anybody who's on as attendee will receive the recording of this, and it'll be on our YouTube channel as well. Rich, Ross, and Jeff, thank you very much. And again, Holly, thank you for putting this together.